Hello, I'm Mark Williams, and earlier in 2021, Gethin Ellis and myself started the PHIT podcast. Here at gethinellis.com and Wide End Limited, we know that whilst physical fitness is essential, our mental health is vital too, and our PHIT podcast is all about putting the human back into technology, aka PHIT. Building on us all coping during unprecedented times in Series 1, available on our website www.gethinellis.com and YouTube, search for Gethin Ellis, we felt in Series 2 it might help us all to hear more thoughts and advice from normal, everyday humans just like you. So we're again speaking with a range of humans in technology, business, consulting and other areas to hear what they've learned and how they intend to apply that experience in dealing with today's challenges and their futures.
All right, everybody, welcome back to part 2. We are still joined by Jono Atherton of Into Foods. Jono, welcome back. Thank you for part 1. It was excellent. The never turn a beer down bit of advice was my probably my favourite one so far, I reckon. But we've got another set of 4 questions here for you, and I think it's probably Mark's turn to kick these off. I can never remember the order that they go in. Mark, do you want to do first, or shall I go first? How do you want to play it?
I don't mind.
I'll go first then.
Okay,
because I'll forget which question we're on otherwise, given my my spider bite infection and what it's doing to me today. So, Jono, the first question, digital transformation, right? And you mentioned in the first part you've got quite a big, you've got quite a lot of technical change going on in your organisation through lockdown and things like that. Do you think organisations need to transform, as in big bang, or is it more about continual improvement? And why would you pick one over the other?
It's a good question, isn't it? In theory, they're one and the same. In my head, they are one and the same. You either start with a transformation because you are on 0 and you need to get to 10 before you can continuous improvement, or you just take it slow and steady. But isn't it just, it's just continuous evolvement, isn't it? It's interesting because I personally, I don't work in the technology department. I don't work in that sector, so I guess you guys see it more. But I've never heard a story of a company that has transformed or done continuous improvement successfully. I only know of negative stories when you think of, Blockbuster missed out on the whole Netflix, Kodak missed out on the whole going digital. I don't know of any that did it successfully. And I guess that's for a reason, because the consumer just goes along with it. But, I go back to the Netflix and the Blockbuster scenario. I remember somewhere in between there where I thought Love Film, where you hired a DVD via post, was the future, and that's how it was always going to be.
Yeah.
But actually, they never evolved, did they? And Netflix just, I guess they transformed. Netflix transformed, went from 0 to hero overnight.
I always compare that to the Ford thing, and there's a famous quote from Henry Ford where he said, "If I asked my customers what they wanted, they tell me faster horses."
Yep.
So it does come back. I guess there are some organisations that have done it, like Next, for example. They seem to have gone through that transformation. A lot of large organisations that have got the resources to take it, like the banks. They have got, but it's not trailblazing like Netflix and even Dyson. You look at Dyson and he's basically taken over the vacuum cleaner industry, and no one would buy it off him because they didn't have any bags in his vacuum cleaners, and that's where they made all their money from. So it's like, yeah, we're not touching you, so he just did it himself. But yeah, no, that is it, and seeing that, the ability to see that change when you're kind of focused in on a specific sector, I guess, is quite difficult. I think
it's a really interesting answer, actually, Jono, because one of the reasons why we put this question into this new series really is as you know, I have my pet hobby horses about certain things, and whilst it pays the bills, when people say we've got to do digital transformation, it just drives me up the wall, because generally speaking, my view is that most organizations don't need to transform, because transform means do it really differently to how you're doing it today and rip it up and start again. You're going in the wrong direction and all those sorts of things. Yes, a few do. And we talked about a couple of the disruptors there with Netflix coming in and Dyson actually disrupting the industry. But I think the reason why, my own take on the reason why you only hear about the failures, is the ones that are doing it okay are actually quietly getting on and doing it all the time, and moving through there. And we actually, in the project that we're working on, we don't talk about transformation at all, really. In fact, we don't talk about continual improvement either. We just talk about, we're doing this, we've got these reasons, haven't we, why we're doing it, and then we've made a few notes as to what we're going to do next once we put that in, and we'll decide, I guess, in the future whether they're still valid, to do that, or whether something else has come along to usurp it. So let's move on from there. And I think I'm interested in this question from the project that I'm working on with you guys, and I'm not going to read it out, per se, but this is all about data. And everybody will say, "Oh, we need to get more data, from what we know." But there's a question here about the balance, and how much data do you need? And if you're doing something that's like the CRP project that you've mentioned a couple of times, what's the balance between, if you like, the data or the tech and the people side of things, the people behaviour, the ways of working side of things, and how do you think that should be balanced, and where do you think the focus should be?
It's difficult. So, I've historically always worked in industries where we have everything is invested in data. The military, aviation, everything is invested in technology and data. You look at the cost of an upgrade to an aircraft compared to the training of a pilot, it's astronomical. But in reality, every industry I've always worked in, nothing has been fully autonomous. It's getting there now, with remotely piloted aircrafts and things, but it's never ever going to be without the human. And for me, I put more weight on developing the human, on how to employ and use the technology effectively. If we go back to the project that we're currently working on, Mark, how many? I want to see this report. I need to see this report. I need to see this data. But nobody ever actually highlights what they're actually looking for. And it's been one of our concerns all the way through this project, that people are just asking for reports because that's what we've always had. And are we at risk of becoming in an echo chamber of, well, we have that report and we get to see it weekly, but how do we act on it? And that's more where I'm focused, in getting the human to act on the data and use the technology. So, to answer the question, because I did a very good impression of Mark Williams there and skirted around the question.
You've noticed. I'm hurt.
I think I personally put more weight on the human for now. I don't know. I guess I'm a difficult person answering this question because I don't come from the technology industry.
Yeah.
Well, I'm never fully going to trust technology. I'm always going to be shy around it and want the human to have the final say. But I do accept that we are getting there with technology, and the way the industry is going that I now work in, we just had a pandemic where removing the human from the element, removing that ping, whatever we've just had, where people who can't work because they're isolating. If we can do that, then the last 2 weeks wouldn't have been any stress at all. But I think we're probably 10 years off of that.
And how do you know that you've got enough data to make the decision? So you're focused on the human side and getting, and why are we doing this? So what are we going to get out of it, and so on and so forth. But you're also acknowledging in the same breath, you've got to have some information in front of you in order to be able to to make that decision. I know we had a bit of an anecdotal conversation about, I forget whether it was your operations director or your CEO now, about, we just knew the business and somebody presented him the report and it was all wonderful, etc., but they didn't realise what the circumstances were that were generating that. I can't remember if it was a spike or a dip now in whatever the figures were saying. So what's your thoughts then? Just sort of think. I'm sure you know the example because I remember we talked about it a month or two ago. But what's your thoughts about how you balance that then? Because you've got in your case there, you've got as we've talked about. I hope this is okay to talk about. You've got a couple of people whose business it is, who know the business inside out. But you've also got data coming through to inform that as well. And when is enough data, or when is it not enough data, And how do you know? Because there's going to be a point where, with the greatest respect, they can't possibly know everything about the business as it goes forwards, because it's just going to be too much for any human to know. So you're going to have your data sources that you rely on.
I think that's probably part of my problem with wanting to trust the human. In fact, we've had an example this week where a report was produced, and I'm not saying this just because they might listen. Both my boss, so the director of ops, and the MD instantly looked at the report and knew it wasn't right, because their mental data and their ability to understand the business and the industry was already far ahead of that, and they spotted and identified the problems instantly. And I think that's probably where I think potentially sometimes there is too much data. I think we narrow the data down and make it more accurate, so that actually, for the likes of my boss and the MD, they can act on that data in full faith of it being.
That sounds like you've got a data quality issue there, because the report's wrong, and the people who are in the know it's wrong, so then they instantly don't trust it, and then they're not going to be reliant on it going forward. So it's important to get that model right, and the data quality needs to be there for that to be a tool that you can use in decision making.
Yep. And I guess that's part of the human. We have to gain the trust of the human first. The data always trusts everything because it's just data. The human needs to trust first.
Yeah,
cool.
Interesting.
Cool, awesome. Right, Jono, we're down to our last two questions in part two, and these are the fun bits. These are the ones that will probably make it into a book or something at some point in the future. So just be warned. I'll take the first one, and Mark, because Mark doesn't like this one. He got to do it for the first few guests, and he didn't like it. He's like, I always get to ask that question. What advice would you give your younger self, or those starting out, or thinking of changing their career to go and work in IT? Basically, what, and not the
not necessarily in IT. Wherever.
Yeah. So advice would you give your younger self?
I think it'd be twofold for myself. Firstly, have a plan, and I'd probably go looking back now at the big. My plan when I first started out as a young worker was get to the weekend. And that's not a very long plan, and it usually didn't go well at the weekend. Definitely a 10-year plan. Know where you want to be, both, and that's not just professional as well, in life on the whole. Especially nowadays, you need to have a 10-year plan just to be able to get a mortgage nowadays. It's insane. But I would also add on to that if your plan is long term, 10 years, then make sure you stick to it and don't get took offline by short-term temptations. I guess it's always a taboo subject, but financials and pay, just don't chase it. It'll come to you eventually. And if you're doing something that you enjoy, then getting a little bit less for a little bit longer is worth it.
You're not the only person that's actually given that out as some advice when we've asked that. So that's an interesting answer. Cool. Thank you. And then I'll let Mark ask the last one.
So it's going to be interesting what your reply to this is, because we might get two fun facts out of this, depending on whatever your reply is. Tell me a fun fact about yourself that maybe not a lot of people know.
So there's probably 2 or 3 people that know this, mainly my wife. If I was to have a perfect Sunday, we'd be on the sofa watching a Disney film at the ripe old age of 34 and loving a beer in a pub. I still love to sit down on the sofa and watch a Disney film.
What's your favourite Disney film?
Lion King, obviously.
Oh, it's not obvious, is it? Mine's Wreck-It Ralph. I like Sundays watching Disney films too.
Well, about a year's time, you'll be able to have a legitimate excuse to sit down and watch a Disney film on a Sunday afternoon, won't you?
Yeah, absolutely. That might change to Cinderella or something, Little Mermaid, but yeah.
Brave. I like Brave. That's technically a Disney film.
I kind of shy away from Brave because it's like a new era of Disney, and I don't know if I'm ready for it.
It's actually very good. It's very good. Billy Connolly's good at it.
So we're going to go to the second fun fact here, Jono, right? But you probably have given the watching a Disney film the fact, because frankly you tell everybody about this fun fact, right? That you build a pub in your back garden. So what inspired you to do that?
Yeah, so me and Claire being my wife, our favourite days out are walking the dogs and just walk. So we live in the country, walk from pub to pub. Every walk is planned around a pub, get into it and get into the next one. And obviously when lockdown happened, that kind of ruined our weekend. But we were both still working full time, so we didn't want to lose that. So I just took to the tools and built a pub in the garden. It's only 3.5 metres by 3.5 metres, but it's got a full working bar with draft pumps and all the good stuff, and Sky Sports.
Fantastic.
Smelly beer carpets and pork scratchings. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. Did it take long to build?
It took me about 3 months. I'm claiming all the fame here. I did have builders run water and electric too. I didn't do that. Yeah, it did come with its downside because we built the pub, and as a result, me and Claire are now expecting our first child in December. So we enjoyed the pub too often.
So, congratulations on your child.
So there's a lovely sort of top and tail here, isn't there? Though, so you drank your way around the world when you were younger, and now at the ripe old age of 34, you're drinking away around the local countryside. So some things never change, huh?
Just more of a niche.
Well, you got to focus.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jono. Thank you for joining us, guys. That brings us to the end of the first episode of season 2 of Putting the Human Back into Technology podcast. We've been joined this week by Jono Atherton. Jono, thank you for coming along. Thank you for being our guest. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Take care, guys.